Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let the handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Here are your hosts, Russ Morgan, Joey Murray, and Will DeShazer. Hey guys, this is Will here with Joey Murray, Russ Morgan, and a special guest. Guys, how are y'all doing today?
Doing great.
Russ, can you introduce a little bit about what this book is that I'm looking at and this author and this well-dressed man sitting here at our table today?
Yeah, I'm excited. You know, this is the first guest, Jim. You're going to be the first guest. We're here with Jim Small. He is the author of the Perpetual Passive Income Machine. He is the founder and CEO, if I'm saying that right, of Santé Realty Investments out of Phoenix, Arizona. So, Jim, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thank you. I'm excited to be part of the podcast as well. So,
Joey, what are you digging into over there?
I'm just looking at this book. I actually read it originally a couple months ago. And as you know, we got to visit Jim out in Phoenix a couple months ago and really just were taken by this opportunity that his company provides for investors. So I wanted to ask Jim if he can kind of just give us a quick overview for those listening. What is Santé all about, and what do you provide as an opportunity?
Sure. So we are essentially an investment that people can make if they want cash flowing real estate. So essentially you're getting cash flow. Just imagine all those tenants paying rent. We pass that right through to our investors immediately after we acquire a property. And then we work really hard to raise those rents, providing more value for our tenants, which provides more cash flow to our investors. So it's a nice hands-off, passive, double-digit return to our investors, and they get paid every month. So it's kind of nice for people that want income, plus the value of the property goes up and up as we do what we do.
Yeah. Well, and just so you're listening to this and like how did we meet Jim and why would we bring him onto our podcast? I think that goes back to, you know, we've been talking that our message and the stuff we're sharing with you is not original content. It's something that we have learned and it's continuing to evolve. Going back to my background as a certified financial planner, which I hate saying that, but I only say that for the instance of the fact that is the mindset that I came from. And I can feel like I can speak to why that mindset is broken because I saw it and how it officially broke in 2009. And last year, Jim, is where I got to meet you. And I actually went out to a summit of advisors that was focused on alternative strategies and thinking. And I was sitting there at this beautiful resort. Jim was just commenting how beautiful Birmingham is right now, which is like rare because we don't get a whole lot of that. The weather
it's beautiful if you're not deadly allergic to pollen.
Yeah. No, and heat and humidity. But right now it's awesome in April with the cool 85 degrees. But Jim and I were in this just beautiful resort area, Deer Valley, Utah, July. I'm talking, you know, it's like Sound of Music stuff that you're dealing with.
So
there.
Austria, was this in Austria?
Yeah. It really was awesome. But I was out there to basically hear the message of passive income. And I got to hear Jim get up and share his concept of what they're doing in multifamily and how they're partnering with investors, just like you and me. It was really inspiring. I'm telling you, I sat back with like 3 other colleagues that I went out there with, and we were kind of evaluating the group of people that talked that day. And every one of us, to a man, kept coming back and saying, what Jim was talking about is awesome. And I took this book that you wrote, Jim, The Perpetual Passive Income Machine, and I read it on the flight back home. And I've shared that with many of the people that are listening to this. So to have you actually here in Birmingham, I'm really stoked that we're not only getting to share you the group that's listening, but also we have a big group that's going to be here today. So you have a background in real estate. Kind of give us some, you know, a little bit into that and kind of how you got into doing what you're doing now.
Sure. So before we were able to actually purchase real estate, I had written a business plan in my MBA program. I wanted to invest in real estate. And my professor looked at me and shook his head and said, you know, Jim, you can't do this. And I said, well, why can't I invest in real estate? And he said, well, you have no money, you have no credit, and you have no wealthy family. And I said, that's true. Those are factors. And so actually he said, why don't you start with managing property? Well, people will pay you to manage their property. And so I begrudgingly started that way. And we ended up actually growing a property management business into 4 states in 2 countries. So we managed 10,000 residential units, which at that time was a value about $2.5 billion of other people's assets. I managed those and learned a lot of lessons of how to help preserve property and increase the value of property and increase sense of community for those neighborhoods and complexes, apartment complexes we were managing. And so I always wanted to be in real estate, just never had the ability, the money, the resources. And eventually someone came along and asked to buy our property management company. And so it gave us a few bucks to start buying apartments. And then some friends and family started asking if they could invest with us. And so we've just structured our deals to make sense for family. And that's just now expanded to their friends and referrals. And now your guys' clients are in some of our investments. And we just do for everybody else, we do for our family when we started, which is we want regular cash flow and we want to build wealth over time. And we do it with real property. So we know where our money is all the time.
And by the way, we've been in his office. Joey and I were there a couple months back, and you really can see the property because he has a camera at all of the different projects, apartment buildings that they have to actually be able to check on the front office, how many people's coming in the office, but also a camera for you because I know you're kind of a neat freak. He has a camera on the garbage cans.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you would hate to have a camera on our garbage can.
No, I love it because here's the deal is someone will call, a resident will call and say, someone dropped off a couch that doesn't live in our community. Or they dropped off a mattress. And I'm like, well, when did they do that this morning? Oh, no, like 2 weeks ago. And we're like, what are you talking about? Like, we need to get rid of this immediately. And so now we really do install cameras on every property we buy to keep a view on the property. And of course, we have property managers and we have regional managers, but we're not at corporate. We're not at all the properties all the time. So this is an extra way to kind of keep an eye on it.
Well, and I tell you what, that's what I love. Below the title of your book is a small tagline, a proven 4-step process for putting an extra paycheck in your pocket every 30 days. Nowhere in that says, do you have to, as an investor, go pick up this couch from the dumpster?
Right, no,
this is not an active income idea, right?
No,
it's
very
all passive.
Very passive. And to your point, we want to make sure that those rents are strong enough when we buy a property that literally every 30 days, we used to send checks. Now we just do a bank transfer. So it's just like getting a direct deposit in your bank account every month. And so we just make sure when we buy the property, we underwrite it thoroughly. So our investors know that within a month or two, when we buy a property, every month thereafter, they're going to get a deposit in their bank account and they'll get a notice via email that says, yeah, a deposit was made today. It is kind of like just having a second job without getting out of bed.
Oh, so you guys have even taken the work out of going to the mailbox or mailbox money.
Email box money.
We should maybe change it to email box money.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Well, I know as people, we're constantly talking to people about how to build wealth outside of Wall Street. And this is the ideal place. This is the one place when people talk about passive income, real estate's what comes to mind. I mean, they've read the Robert Kiyosaki's of the world. They've gotten deep into, okay, I'm going to go buy 50 rental properties. I'm going to be the slumlord. I'm going to be doing this. And then they get one, it goes badly, and they stop.
Yeah, that's right. Sure.
But multifamily is completely different to that. Like, speak to that and what you guys have experienced has been in that multifamily space and why it's so unique.
Yeah, I mean, my wife and I, we bought our first house and then we made that a rental and we bought another house and made that a rental. And I always give people great accolades for investing in real estate. And if you can do that yourself and you can manage the tenants and toilets and roofs, please do it. It's a great way to build wealth. If you study, entrepreneurs like I've done and people over history, how they've created wealth and kept wealth, it's through real estate. Even people that make all this .com billions, guess where it goes? Into real estate. And so if you can really start that for your own family and for your own self, it's a great place to be. But you're right in that when you've got, 100 apartments in one place, you can have one maintenance person that handles any clogged toilet or any backed up garbage disposal. And of course, they work for us. Our investors don't have to deal with that. But we just get some serious economies of scale by having it all in one place. And so we have one roof with 16 units under one roof. Well, if that roof has an issue, we don't have to go do it with 16 houses. And so there's some great economies of scale and some great synergies. I mean, one major laundry room, one playground, one parking lot. There's just a lot of benefits of having an apartment complex versus, 16 or 20 or 30 individual houses that you've got to deal with.
Well, let me ask you this in addition to that, Jim. As you know, my company, Blueprint Financial Partners, really focuses in with real estate professionals and specializes with those folks. And they always talk about rentals as residential rentals because it almost seems like commercial or apartments are out of reach.
Sure.
Like financially, the barrier of entry to get into that space is just too big to overcome. So speak to how, through Santé and through your model, how you make that a little bit more tangible, a little bit more possible.
Yeah, we were fortunate when we sold our property management company that we could actually go buy properties directly. But even having literally a 7-figure sale, we only bought 2 properties before we ran out of enough cash to go buy the 3rd property. It's just very capital intensive to buy apartment complexes, to your point. So what we've done is we've just basically carved it up so we can have bite-sized pieces for investors to come in with us. So, a typical deal may be for us, if we're buying a $4 million apartment complex, we'll get the loan, the debt as a $3 million loan, let's say, and that $1 million left over to buy that $4 million property, we'll carve that up into 10 pieces for investors. So an investor can come in at $100,000 out of their, account, whether it's a retirement account or their brokerage account or investment account. And so for $100,000, they can be part of a $4 million asset. And again, we just started this because we did it for our family and our friends. And that's how we continue to do it today. So as that scales up to be a little bit larger property, a little smaller property, we always just have a small chunk that we can get investors in and have them taste that monthly cash flow and, that upside premium as we add value to the property over the years to come.
I just think that is so great because, again, most people would never think they could get to be a part of something that large. So they would start with those residentials and then, like as you said, Russ, many times burn out or not ever get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I can give you those horror stories. I wanted to be a real estate investor, so I bought a condo. I bought it in my home college town, and it was like, this is great. Yeah, I'm going to be an investor. I didn't even know what that meant when I bought this thing. Years and years ago, and of course, I bought it at absolutely the wrong time. And this was, I heard you and Joey talking about this before we came on. I bought a condo that had been converted from an apartment complex, and about 6 months later, the university added 5,000 units on campus and made it mandatory for freshmen to stay in those things. So obviously, what do you think that did to the rent of the space I was in? Going down, right? I mean, that was a real downer. And when you're looking, I heard you talking about this. When you're looking for areas, just kind of give some background on demographics, trends that you're looking for as to what would be a good investment from a multifamily unit space. Like, what are you looking for?
I think there's different spaces you can invest in. Depends on your approach, philosophy, horizon for holding the asset, what your financing is. There's multiple factors that go into that. But for us, what we're looking for is really to buy and hold the asset for cash flow for decades. And so in order to do that, we have to match up the demographics and the area we're buying in with, again, the financing and those things. So for us, we really like in real estate, as you guys may know, there's Class A, brand new, nice, shiny buildings, typically lower returns. And then you go to Class B, a little bit older, but kind of working class folks live there. Class C is maybe a bad area or really older property. And D is those slums that you were talking about earlier. You probably don't want to be in D, but for us, we're typically buying in Class B assets, which means they're not the newest, they're not the shiniest. But as we improve them, whether it's new flooring in the units or it's new playgrounds in the common area or a new pool and those kind of things, it's going to give us the most lift of rents. And so we want to be in an area of the country that's got, at least 250,000 population. We want to have a regional airport. We want to have diverse employment around there. We don't want to just be in a .com area or a healthcare area or a coal area or whatever the case may be. So we've got some non-negotiables when we look at an area that we want to buy in, but then we also look at that asset class. Is it a B asset or C, or what's the area of town it's in? And so there's really a very thorough underwriting that happens for every property we buy, and we got to get all these check marks. We really only buy about 1 out of every 100 properties that comes across our inbox. There's a lot of criteria, but demographics is one of them.
I know that Joey, his client base is made up of the real estate community, as he was saying a second ago. And so that's probably just what you just mentioned and touched on. But you get a lot of real estate thrown at you, which is really amazing because the average person investing in real estate, and this just goes back to my own personal experience and just talking to clients, they don't have a lot of diversity into what even they're looking at when they're investing. They get excited about investing in a property and they go out and find the first for sale sign that they can get and they go buy it, right?
Sure.
Where you said 1 out of 100
Yeah.
that you actually decide to take advantage of. I mean, that requires a lot of people pitching you property and then a lot of background on your part.
Sure. And I think one of the things we've learned as we've analyzed now thousands and thousands of properties is there's just blatantly wrong data we get a lot of time. Maybe it's brokers trying to be more optimistic than they should be. I'm going to try and be nice about that. But when we underwrite things, we're like, wait, you say the rents are $700 a month and everyone that has a lease is at $500 a month. Like it just doesn't add up. And so it's amazing sometimes what we discover. And if you kind of go without having a thorough underwriting process, you could really be upside down underwater when you buy a property day one. And sometimes things even get past a lender. The lender will look at stuff and say, okay, well, you told us it's $700 a month in rent. That's great. We'll loan you the money, especially if you have good credit and a good down payment. And all of a sudden you own it and the lender doesn't care that you don't have enough cash flow. They're still getting their payment or they're going to own the property and they'll just foreclose on it.
Right.
So you really got to be really thorough. And, it probably takes us 4 to 5 months from when a property is introduced to us to when we close on it. That's how long it takes to get engineering reports, survey reports, appraisals, environmental studies, demographic feasibility analysis, all kinds of things. And so there's a whole lot of background of research on all kinds of areas before, or at least our investors ever see it.
That's awesome. Well, I know one thing too, the 4 of us are still counting the amount of money that we just wrote to our loving Uncle Sam, right?
Yep.
And this is an area that is important because we always talk about the mindset of Wall Street and we have to think outside of it. We have to find ways that were not created by the government entities in other areas, because most of the things people put money in, as you know, Jim, are tax qualified plans. They're plans to defer taxes to the future, or they buy things that produce income, but unfortunately 100% of that is subject to ordinary income tax.
Sure.
Everybody knows to a degree the benefits of investing in real estate, but speak to that because I know your investors, the dollars they're getting, because we're going to get into that, the specific 1030 plan that you have, but specifically, like what are some of those benefits real estate investors really are enjoying?
Well, I think if you're buying cash flow property, and not everybody does, right? Some people will buy land and hope the value goes up, or some people will buy development and hope you raise money that way. And those are great strategies if you have an expertise in those. Ours is very specific that we want cash flow day one and more cash flow day 2 through infinity. And so for us, we want to make sure that happens no matter what the tax situation is, first of all. So the taxes are an added benefit for us, not a focus. But the added benefits of real estate, to your point on taxes, are kind of twofold at a high level. One, you can deduct mortgage interest on these properties. And so when you're borrowing $3 million in my earlier example of buying a $4 million property, that's a lot of interest you can deduct every year so that that's not taxable. And then the second one, which is even bigger, is depreciation. So the IRS has said you have to depreciate this building, which is to pretend that it's costing you money and it's going down in value. That's the word depreciation, when the reality is real estate does the opposite. It goes up in value and it appreciates. But the IRS literally by law makes you depreciate the building. And so you are actually able to show a reduction in your income. So a lot of our investors, if they are getting, let's just say $10,000, for example, a year in cash flow, they're probably only paying tax on $3,000 or $4,000 of it because of the mortgage interest and depreciation. And you literally have to take it. Like if you don't put it on your tax return, the IRS will put it on your tax return for you. So you get this tax deferral, tax shelter structure from depreciation. And the bigger the asset, as you can imagine, just from straight math, the more depreciation you get. So the bigger assets we buy, the more tax sheltering our investors get. And in our structure, at least, and I don't know that everybody's this way, but in our structure, we pass through that depreciation directly to our investors. So they get the benefit of that literally day one.
That is so huge. And as you mentioned, a lot of different things that we'll cover on this podcast as it relates to passive income and other strategies. But I think what you just mentioned is so critical for people to understand, because what you see as a return versus what you actually realize can be two very different things.
Sure.
And I think that was a great example to show. Okay, so some people, I'm sure, as they're listening, are probably trying to understand a little bit more detail around they've purchased now an asset. I'm just saying, let's say we bought this $4 million property.
Yeah.
Santé is now managing it professionally, which I think, again, huge benefit, not having to be the one that understands all those things. And
I'm not doing toilets.
I mean, the knowledge that it would take, I mean, all the bumps and bruises that Russ and I both share war stories on that kind of stuff. Not having to go through that is huge. But now talk a little bit about the expertise as it relates to when do you ever sell?
Sure.
Or do you ever sell? Like, I know you mentioned this is a cash flow thing, so you don't want to necessarily kill it,
Right.
but some cases that may be required or necessary.
Yeah. I mean, we used to buy properties. We love the cash flow and occasionally we'd sell them. And then we'd get a little bit of money that we'd make and say, okay, now we got to go look through 100 more properties to find the one gem we're going to buy. This takes a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, as you can imagine. So in our structure now, what folks do, and I'll maybe just walk through it real fast, is if someone invests with us, imagine that $100,000 investment into our $4 million property that we're buying. Our investors get what's called a preferred return, meaning they're going to get a guaranteed amount back every year. Comes in monthly chunks, but it's a 7% return on their capital they've invested with us. So they're getting that out of the gates no matter what. And then on top of that, we share profits equally with our investors. So every quarter, we calculate what the profits were from the property, and we send half of those as additional payments to our investors. The way we make money is we keep the other half. So that's the cash flow model. Now, our investors, we never change the percentage they own. They always own the same amount. So if you invest day one and you own 5%, Joey, you're going to own 5% forever. But the cool part of our investments now, we've got financing that lets us essentially refinance the property after 3 years. So what happens is when our investors put that $100,000 in, after 3 years, we're giving them that $100,000 back because we refinanced the property. We've essentially added value. And so the bank says to us, well, you guys took a $4 million property and made it a $5 million property. So we'll lend you an extra $1 million. Well, when we take that extra $1 million, we carve it up amongst our investors that put the capital in originally. And so they'll get their money back, but they still keep the profit cash flow and they still keep their ownership in the property. So if we eventually sell in 10 or 15 or 20 years, they'll also get profits from the sale eventually. But we basically want them to get their capital back sooner rather than later while still getting those profits for years to come.
I've just had this epiphany in that I think that, have you ever watched the show The Profit?
Oh, yeah. All the
Marcus
time.
Lemonis.
Yeah.
Right? Have you ever
Great.
been described as the Marcus Lemonis
No.
of multifamily housing?
No, I think he's a genius. So
He is.
probably
He's
not even
great.
close to putting me in the same sentence, but thanks, Will.
But I see that though, and you mentioned you guys increasing the value of that complex or these complexes $1 million over 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one example. Can you talk a little bit about a recent story of how you've done that? Maybe a recent property that you guys have acquired that's 3 years old and you've done this, and that to it. Like, what are you doing to these complexes that is increasing the value for the investors?
Well, oftentimes we've got to do a pretty good job in our analysis to make sure that we're buying a property where the rents are less than the comparable rents around that area of town. So we did this example in a certain part of Tennessee. We bought a couple apartment complexes. We knew that the rents were less than the comparable rents. And so we knew no matter what we did, we could raise rents already when we bought the property. So that goes back to that underwriting that we do up front. When we bought those, we also said, you know what, there's not really a real good playground here. There was actually a tenant I met, real nice little lady. She lived in that complex for 30 years. And then in one of the bigger units, 3 bedrooms. I mean, pictures from the 80s of her kids growing up there and everything. Sweet lady. And I said, ma'am, how long have you lived here? 30 years. She said, I said, well, how often do they raise your rents? I said, well, I don't think I've ever had a rent raise. And so her rent was like literally $200 or $300 a month. And we said,
so that's why she's been there.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly. I said, ma'am, we're going to give you new carpet. We're going to give you new appliances and we're going to raise your rent. Oh, that'd be fine, dear. And so we basically went through the complex and added the exterior things. I mean, we had nice new signs. We had American flags. We had LED lighting to the outside, the cameras Russ mentioned for kind of I don't want to say safety, but really for surveillance to kind of make sure everyone just stays above board. No weird people from outside the property come in. So we're doing things to the outside of the property. And we're doing things to the interior of the units. And that, in addition to the fact that we're buying the property, right, lets us raise those rents. And the way that banks value real estate is how much is your net operating income.
Right.
And so the more rents we have without increasing expenses, the same amount, just literally by mathematics, makes the value of the property go up. And in the case of those 2 apartment complexes in Tennessee, we actually raised the value of those by $1 million in about 18 months. We bought those for actually about $2.7 million each. So that was a really great opportunity for us to do that. And we're in the process now of returning all the investors' capital. And again, it's been about 18, 19 months now.
That's really cool. I mean, because we're talking about strategic ways to increase our wealth without Wall Street, where most of Wall Street mindset is based on hope, right? We buy real estate because we hope it's going to appreciate.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is strategically increasing revenues is what banks are looking at as a means to valuing the property itself, which is such a better strategy because it is a strategy that actually can be fulfilled. You can see it in what you're talking about, what you're doing and improving the lives of the tenants in there, giving them playgrounds. I mean, I know that's one of the things I resonated with, having 4 kids, just thinking of the playgrounds, because I grew up in apartment complexes. You know, my parents were very poor, if you would, upper, lower class, whatever you want to say. I basically grew up as a redneck, but
Thank you for clarifying for me.
The idea is a playground was like,
welcome to Alabama.
Go get lost in the woods kind of concept, because the places we lived, they didn't have playgrounds. So that was really something that resonated with me when you were talking about how you guys are going in there and improving the complexes themselves, and really, hopefully, not only improving the community in addition to the investors who are coming alongside you.
Yeah, we call it forced appreciation. So instead of hoping the value is going to go up and appreciate, we force it to go up by raising rents and adding nice new interiors and exteriors to the properties.
A couple of little things I've just picked up on. I know we got to wrap up here in just a second, but number one, again, my world is really centered around residential real estate. And there is a lot of risk in not knowing what the other homes around you are going to sell for. So you're really kind of banking and hoping versus, like you said, the strategic way that you're actively adding value, which is going to then create value in the actual appraised value of that multifamily. So I think that's a really key thing for people to know who are listening in. The second thing that you went through, and I want to make sure when we start talking numbers, we're not sitting face to face with people. So I want to just kind of quickly go back to what you mentioned. You mentioned returning the investor's capital.
Right.
That is a huge, huge benefit when you still have ownership in the property. That means you're still enjoying the profits. You're still enjoying those on a quarterly basis or what have you.
You just heard from Jim Small, Managing Director of Santé Realty Investments. To pick up his book or check out more about it, you can look for it on Amazon Prime. The name of his book is The Perpetual Passive Income Machine, a proven 4-step process for putting an extra paycheck in your pocket every 30 days. Again, this is Will with the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, and I cannot wait to fill your speakers again next episode. This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.